This is day 114 of our journey through the Bible. We are still in the book of Jeremiah. This is a long book, one of the longest in the Bible. It has 52 chapters. It's also one of the hardest to follow and understand in terms of just how the book is arranged together. Unlike most of the other prophetic books, which have a sort of chronological arrangement, the material in Jeremiah seems to follow no logical pattern. Prophecies delivered in the very last years of Jeremiah's ministry sometimes appear at any point in the book, followed by messages that belong to other periods of his life. Mingled with his prophecies of God's approaching judgment are historical accounts of selected events in the life of Judah, personal experiences from Jeremiah's own life, and poetic laments about the fate of the country. It is important to be aware of this if you want to understand the message of this great prophetic book. Perhaps the best way to get a big picture of the book of Jeremiah is to break it down into primarily two types of literature. For the most part, the first half of the book, chapters 1 through 25, consists of poetry, while the second half, chapters 26 through 52, are written in a prose or narrative style of writing. The poetry section of the book contains Jeremiah's prophecies of God's approaching judgment against Judah because of its sin and idolatry. The prose section contains a few of his prophecies, but the main emphasis is on Jeremiah and his conflicts with the kings who ruled Judah during his ministry. Also included near the end of the book is a report on the fall of Jerusalem and Judah's final days as a nation. That's in chapters 39 through 41 and also 52, along with a narrative about Judah's flight into Egypt with other citizens of Judah following its fall. That's in chapters 42 through 44. After prophesying against Judah for about 20 years, the prophet Jeremiah was commanded by God to put his message in written form. He dictated these to his scribe or secretary, Baruch, who wrote them on a scroll. Now, because Jeremiah had been banned from entering the royal court, he sent Baruch to read the messages to King Jehoiakim. To show his contempt for Jeremiah and his message, the king cut the scroll apart and threw it in the fire. Jeremiah promptly dictated his book to Baruch again, adding many similar words according to chapter 36, verse 32, that had not been included in the first scroll. This sort of clear description of how a second version of Jeremiah came to be written shows the book was composed in several different stages during the prophet's ministry. The scribe Baruch was probably the one who added to the book at Jeremiah's command as it was shaped and refined over a period of several years. This is a possible explanation for the sort of disjointed arrangement of the book. Baruch must have put the book in its final form shortly after Jeremiah's death. This would place its final writing not long after 585 BC. So I suppose Jeremiah's greatest contribution to us comes in his picture of the new covenant. It's found in chapter 31, verses 31 through 34. We'll read that in just a few moments. A new covenant between God and his people was necessary because the old covenant had failed so miserably. The captivity of God's people by a foreign power was proof of that. Although the old covenant had been renewed again and again throughout Israel's history, the people still continued to break the promises they had made to God. What was needed was a new type of covenant between God and his people, a covenant of grace and forgiveness written in man's heart, rather than a covenant of law engraved in stone. As Jeremiah reported God's plan for his new covenant in chapter 31, he anticipated the dawning of the era of grace in the person of Jesus Christ that would be more than 500 years in the future. I would encourage you to read particularly the whole chapter 31 of Jeremiah. Note the way that this prophet, like Isaiah, saw the rainbow after the storm. It was God's blessings that are never going to be cut off forever because of our sinning. He is the God of hope. Well, let's right now read just a few passages from Jeremiah 31. We begin with verse 31. Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah, not like the covenant that I made with their fathers on the day when I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt. My covenant that they broke, though I was their husband, declares the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord. I will put my law within them, and I will write it on their hearts. And I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And No longer shall each one teach his neighbor and each his brother, saying, Know the Lord. For they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest, declares the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more.